to work. And Miami Today, which has, you know, been kind to almost everyone in this room. I first met Michael in early 1983 when he came to call on me here, not here, across the street in the Northern Trust building to tell me about his brand new newspaper, Miami Today. I really wasn't interested in his newspaper, but I was very interested in his analysis of the Miami market. He had done his homework. He knew who the people were that he needed to attract. And he impressed me. And so when he asked me to be the first bank to advertise, I said yes. Now, I did not say yes to every other time that Carmen asked me which was frequent. I later worked with him in launching the Brickell Avenue Literary Society. I came to Michael, I called him and I said, Michael, I have just come back from a session of the Park Avenue Literary Society, where I met Tom Wolfe, whom I had no idea who the hell he was, but he had written a book called Bonfire of the Vanities. And he said it was great. I don't think I ever read it, but I did read that it was great. And I said, I think that would be a great thing for Northern Trust and Miami Today to co-host. And he said, no, Ray, I don't think so. He said, Miami is not ready for a literary society. He said, people read here, but they don't read serious stuff. He said, it's not all pornography, but some of it. And I said, well, you know, I think it will, because we're not going to really try to attract people who read. We want to attract people who have money. And I said, whether or not they read doesn't really matter all that much. But and he said, well, let's give it a try. And sure enough, before we did the end of the first mailing, we had a waiting list of about 150 people. I later convinced him to co-sponsor the Prologue Society. I know you all know the quote, what is past is prologue. It is, it's dedicated to the study of history, or the love of history. And Carmen served as chairman of the society for quite a number of years. I'll get back to that later if you don't mind. Michael is a fine gentleman, but a lousy roast subject. He's ethical. He's honest. He's smart. And he has no known criminal record. Which is quite unusual for Miami. Some of you may have noticed a recent Miami Herald obituary. As you know, the Miami Herald and Miami Today barely speak. Anyway, they reported the death of one Michael Lewis from overeating chocolates. Michael was furious. He demanded a retraction. They drugged their feet, and finally they printed this. The Herald deeply regrets that its publication of Mr. Lewis's death was not accurate. I liked that one. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about Michael before the roasters began. Well, like Northern Trust, he was born in Chicago, but he was raised in Highland Park, Illinois, a very ritzy suburb on the North Shore. I don't think there's a house there worth less than $100,000. Early on, his father, who was a part-time band leader, tried to convince him to get interested in playing the clarinet. But it didn't work. Michael didn't do well with the clarinet, and like my rhythm band master in school, he said, "You don't have any rhythm." And so Michael decided instead to go into sports. And so he applied to be a left guard on the high school football team. Instead, he was left out. He loves golf, but he hasn't played golf in 10 years. At the University of Michigan, he received his BA and MA with honors, with a concentration in journalism. He was Phi Beta Kappa, whatever that is. In his freshman year, he was required to take 2 semesters of English. But after the first semester, his professor exempted him from the second semester and said, quote, "You will never learn to write, Michael." End quote. After being tossed out of English, Michael went into journalism and became the journalism department's grader and its only teaching fellow in history. His impressive newspaper career began when he spent 3 summers during his college years managing the Mackinac Town Crier. And I wondered when I first read this, how in the world he got to Mackinac Island. Everybody know where that is? It's in the middle of nowhere, really. Well, anyway, he edited the paper, he reported, he kept the books, he set the type, he sold the advertising, he delivered the newspapers. Some of you might know that Mackinac Island is best known for its chocolate fudge. So therefore I know how he got there. There are no cars on the island, and his story about that and the shortage of horseshoes on the island made national news, if you can believe that. It's obviously a slow week. After that, the entrepreneur in Michael came out, and he went to the small town of Harbor Springs, Michigan, which, by the way, is a very pretty town. And he started up the weekly newspaper, the Harbor Light, because the newspaper there had gone out of business, and he felt strongly that every town ought to have a newspaper, whether they needed it or not. He learned many valuable lessons during his startup, but the most valuable was in dealing with elected officials. He got a call almost immediately from his largest advertiser, who also happened to be the town mayor. And Michael drove down to the mayor's restaurant. He owned a restaurant, where he was told the proprietor, advertiser, mayor was in the basement. He went down to the basement, and there the mayor was with a huge knife chopping fish. And he said gruffly to Michael that he had not liked the way Michael quoted him in the first issue. Michael said, "Were the quotes accurate?" He said, "Oh yes, that's the problem." He said he didn't want people to know what he said at city council meetings. To Michael's credit, the quotes continued every week, and the mayor kept advertising. Well, after that, he really got into a newspaper career. He had a hard time keeping a job, but he had a lot of jobs. With Gannett, he was metropolitan editor in Rochester. Which Rochester?
New York.
New York. Ooh. That's one cold town. With the Chicago Tribune Company, he was the assistant managing editor in Orlando. But he admitted that he had to buy a map to find out where Orlando was. With Knight Ridder, he was the metropolitan editor in Charlotte, North Carolina. And with Cox, the assistant managing editor to the late Miami News. Along the newspaper road, Michael found himself sitting side by side with one Rupert Murdoch at the New York Post, where he found that the truth never stood in the way of a good story. He had to personally edit the work of the lead reporter at the New York Post, a man whose best work, and really all his work, was done under the influence of alcohol. This was Steve. Steve had trouble keeping the facts straight. When Michael confronted him about it, Steve replied, "Look, I just write the stories. You put in whatever facts you want." And thus Michael moved to Miami, where the facts have never bothered any newspaper, and certainly didn't bother the politicians. He jumped ship after being with the Miami News as assistant managing editor for how many years? 5 years. 5 years. And he decided that Miami was becoming international, was changing dramatically, and that it was just the right time to start a weekly newspaper. As I said earlier, he had done his homework. He had really looked at the Miami market, and he saw what it was and what it was becoming. I was born in Miami recently. And when I was born and grew up as a kid, and what it is today are just night and day. I mean, it isn't even close, nothing close. He had a staff of 3 in this new newspaper, but he got lucky. He was still a bachelor, and his friends in Miami were on the prowl for him. And over a 1-month period, they had already introduced him to 4 different women. 4 friends, 4 women, 4 beautiful women. A week later, he's walking down Flagler Street, where he saw yet another beautiful woman looking in a store window. And with a rare for him show of aggression, he realized that this beautiful woman was the same as the other 4. He had not caught the name during the other introductions. Most likely he was focused on something else. Now one-on-one with Carmen Betancourt, he introduced himself once again. Michael realized that he'd been trying to telephone a Carmen Betancourt, now one and the same, for legitimate newspaper business. He asked to talk to her in her office that day. She gave him the business. They were married 6 months later. He swears that if he had realized it was a jewelry store window she was looking at, that he probably wouldn't have proposed so quickly. He did so on their first date. Now, you know, I would never have guessed that of Michael. That's amazing, Michael. On the first date, wow. Carmen, you are a good sales lady. Their marriage is the best thing that ever happened to Miami today. Because, as Michael has said, she brings in the money and he spends it. He said that's a good formula for success, except at home it's just the opposite. This married duo is responsible for the success of Miami today over the past 31 years. It reaches 70,000 plus readers a week, and its website is now seen in over 140 foreign nations, including Miami. Now I'm going to introduce the roasters, and they're supposed to do the dirty work. The first is Don Slesnick. Don is best known in Florida for his 4 tenures as mayor of Coral Gables. Oh, by the way, of all these people, they're as nice as they could be, and there's not a felon among them. What is not so well known is that he served with distinction for 27 years as an officer in the United States Army, coming out as a colonel. He had numerous battle ribbons, combat ribbons, and the awards culminated in the Meritorious Service Medal. He's active in so many community organizations that if I tried to list all of them, it would take the rest of the evening. And I know you're anxious for the bar to reopen. He's a Vietnam veteran. He's honorary consul for Australia. That's interesting. He's a member of the Orange Bowl Committee. And what impressed me the most is that he is a graduate of Miami Senior High School, of which I am also. It is probably one of the most beautiful high schools in the entire nation, and they have just redone it. After I graduated, they sealed up all the windows. It wasn't because of the students getting out, it was because of air conditioning. But it changed the nature of it. Now they've done that back again, and it's if you haven't ever seen Miami High, go over there and see it. Before I graduated, they had never been beaten in football in the city of Miami. And they had been state champions 18 different times. It's a wonderful school. He's the managing partner of the law firm of Slesnick and Casey. He's a bit overeducated. He holds degrees from the University of Virginia, which is where I wanted to go to law school. When I got out of the Air Force and came back to Miami, I said, Dad, I would like to go to the University of Virginia Law School because I heard it would have the best parties in the Southeast. And my father said, Ray, you can go to any law school in the nation, but I'm paying for UM. So I went to UM. He's really a true credit to our community, and here he is. Thank you, guys.
Well, I must say that I'm extremely nervous speaking before such a distinguished group of people, which is not usual for me. So I'd like to read to you some prepared remarks. I am honored to have been asked to take part in this occasion celebrating the life of one of the nation's outstanding journalists and trend-setting fourth estate executives. His professional life is characterized by his honesty, devotion to the public weal, generosity, intelligence, to name a few of his notable traits. His future success was foretold during his early years in wielding wise opinions on behalf of justice in his columns while editor of the Florida Alligator. From there, David Lawrence, I'm sorry, that was last night. You know, Michael, that doesn't leave me with much. You know, when I was first asked to do this, I said, Michael Lewis wants me to speak. I said, wait a minute. I was mayor for 10 years. I never made the Achievers column. And 2 weeks after I left office, my successor, the man who beat me at the polls, the Honorable Jim Kaysen sitting here, was on the Achievers column. Now, I don't hold grudges, Michael, and I forget these things. This was some years ago, but I'm forgetting. You know, I was going to ask Susan Kahn for some funny stories because she's one of the funniest people I know, and then I saw she was on the program, and then I said, my goodness, I'm all by myself here. You know, Ray was so good about telling you some of the Carmen and Michael stories. You know, Carmen and Michael last week were sitting out on their balcony overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in Key Biscayne. I guess some of you, most of you have been there, all of you. And they were sharing some wine, and they were sitting there contemplating the beautiful reflected sunset from behind them. And Carmen said, you know, I love you so much. I don't know how I could live without you. Michael said, is that you talking or the wine? And she said, that's me talking to the wine. So, in an effort to be quick and move the program along, I am going to skip to the grand finale, a presentation. I asked David Sampson to accompany me here tonight. David said he was planning a visit to the dentist tonight, but he did send something for you, Michael. He said he wanted to know that anything in the past is past, and certainly some of the hard feelings are no longer. And so he sent me this, Michael, for you. This is an original Miami Marlins bobblehead of Jose Reyes, who, by the way, left the team over a year ago. So these aren't in great demand anymore, but this is for the work and support you've given the Marlins and their hard trials and tribulations. And you can have. And one more sports-related thing, and then I'm off, right? But I just wanted you to know, Michael, this is probably the highlight. The University of Michigan is dedicating this football year to you. It's not been very good so far, Michael, but whatever they do this year, it's in your behalf. So they may win a second game soon. Michael, it's a great pleasure. Jeanette and I love you and Carmen. We love being part of your extended family, and I am so happy and appreciative that I was part of this tonight. God bless. You have it, Mike.
Thank you. That was great.
Who's next? I'll give it to him.
Next is our youngest roaster. He's he's the son of another mayor of Coral Gables, Raul Valdez Foley, who's here somewhere. Where are you, Raul? There he is. There he is. He's related to Michael and Carmen Lewis through marriage with the Valdez Foley family. Mike Valdez Foley heads his own marketing and PR firm, which has offered counsel to a wide array of the world's largest companies and best-known brands. He's an accomplished writer who's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Ad Age, Ad Week, PR Week, the Miami Herald, Miami Today, and the New York Times. Here's Mike.
Just like that sleazy reporter, I think they asked me here because I also do my best work after a few drinks. So. To Northern Trust, Carmen Sita Lewis, Ray Marchman, thank you very much for asking me to serve on the distinguished dais. I have no doubt Michael will regret it. Many of you don't know me, but I'm the Valdez Foley with hair. Although I'm told that's fleeting, so I should say I'm a short Valdez Foley. That doesn't work either, does it? So, I had the pleasure of seeing Matt Lauer, the journalist, roasted at the New York Friars Club a few years ago. That's where these kind of things began, that tradition. And it's an iconic institution that has immortalized roasts for the likes of Frank Sinatra, Don Rickles, Ronald Reagan, and Elvis. You know, guys just like Michael Lewis. They had a saying that we only roast the ones we love. Well, tonight will be a huge exception. But before we get to you, Michael, I think we should explore the fertile ground among our dais here, which Don was kind enough to avoid, and he does not get a chance to come back up. But, you know, this is an interesting crew. I do bring the age range down about 30 years. I know Northern Trust was kind enough to host us tonight, but perhaps a more appropriate sponsor would have been Caballero Rivero Woodlawn. The guns have come out. That's right. I mean, Ron Sheffield is only here because he thinks half of you will sell your primary residence tonight. I normally begin speeches by inviting people to follow me on Twitter, but I think I'd have to start by explaining what Twitter is. Jack Lowell, with each passing year, you look more like Wilford Brimley. Flagler Development and Quaker Oats. It's the right thing to do. We have Don Slesnick here, the Honorable, and tonight we extract our family vengeance. No, I have nothing but kind things to say about Don, who was a great mayor and has been nice to our family. But if you look at the succession, Raul J. Valdez-Valley, Don Slesnick, Jim Kaysen. What a paragon of beauty and physical fitness. I mean, it's really unbelievable. Speaking of Coral Gables, Mark Trowbridge is here. You may have noticed him when he walked in. Not sure what to make of it, but I love it. Mark, you look like if Mario Batali let himself go. Or maybe like a before and after picture of Toronto Mayor Rob Ford. I'm not sure which one's after. I mean, don't ask me, but you can talk to Mark in a few minutes. But I digress. You know, Carmencita is someone who holds a special place in all of our hearts. And, you know, they say behind every good man is Michael Lewis. Let me try that again. They say behind every good man is an aggressive salesperson, and we're starting right at the top of that very list. She's so shy and introverted, right? Always the lightest touch. Such a light touch when she calls. You know that phrase that someone could sell ice to Eskimos? Well, Carmencita could force those Eskimos to buy a full-page ad in a commercial real estate issue. Spotlight on igloos. It can't be easy doing what she does, because so often there are people on the other end of the line that aren't ready for whatever reason to make a purchase, but she does it in always a very cheerful demeanor and certainly very colorful. She's a woman with a larger collection of hats than her collection of rejection emails, and we've seen many of those. But she's also a force of nature and a true icon in our community, and I'd like to stop right now for a quick round of applause for Carmen. Yeah. And now we set our sights on the man of the hour. I'll tell you, Michael, if you are having half as much fun as I am, well, then I'm having twice as much fun as you. But anyway, you embody one fundamental quality of all classic newspapermen. You're very old. If you look up quintessential Miami newsman in the dictionary, you'll see a picture of Michael Putney. I know Michael very, very well. For one thing, we collaborate together often. My agency often has clients clamoring to get into your very respected and prestigious publication. But as was mentioned earlier, we're also family members. George Galvis, my brother who's here tonight, is stepson to Michael and son to Carmencita. So we've witnessed Michael at many Cuban family gatherings. So talk about an out-of-your-element culture clash. You know, attending lunch at my father's house for him with 14 grandkids must be like being a tourist in a foreign country. Can't speak the language, don't understand the customs, can't eat the food, and aren't quite sure if they're all talking about you. We are. But like everything he does, he handles it with aplomb. Our master of ceremonies walked you through his background, so I will spare you that. But I do think from a PR perspective, which is something I know a thing about, his editorial page is truly iconic and makes such a big impact on our community and well beyond it. His editorial, yeah, please. His style in editorial is a lot like his taste in women, loud. It's these very editorials that present the greatest example of his passion and fervor for our community. Like all great journalists, his true talent is most evident when he has a worthy adversary. So think Edward R. Murrow and Joseph McCarthy, William Randolph Hearst versus J.P. Morgan, just in that same league as you versus David Sampson. So Michael, you've battled the Marlins aggressively, taking it on as a pet project, a personal vendetta, some might say obsession. And my own connection, as many of you might know, we have the Miami Marlins as a client. So we work with a lot of big companies, but I'm paid by them. So, it's just interesting to read his editorial page where a lot of interesting insights and compelling arguments are made. But somehow, even though the stadium was built 3 years ago, you still can't read a single one without him somehow working in the Marlins. Port Miami Tunnel, the only bigger waste of money was Marlins Park. School board issues, the best education is knowing what a villain Jeffrey Luria is. Ballot initiatives, I've seen more transparency in the Marlins ledger. So that's a frequent thing every week that we always look forward to at the PR firm for the Marlins. Thank you for that. Makes me look great, and I'm so glad.
They need your work.
Yes, they do. So the interesting thing is David Sampson, who has already been discussed, has often sent me messages for Michael, his best regards. And some of those I can't say in polite company. But what I can do is give you something in addition to Mayor Slesnick's wonderful gift tonight that I think will be near and dear to your heart. This is a signed autograph from David Sampson. Michael, congrats, all my love and admiration. And as I'll hold this up in a second, he's demonstrating for you very altruistically the proper grip for a fastball, but it's also the proper grip for something else. I'll pass that around for show and tell. I certainly hope this is framed in your illustrious office for many years to come. I'll frame it for you. I'll blow it up. Okay. So, in closing, this is good fun, but all on behalf of a truly remarkable journalist, citizen, advocate in our community, and human being. We all have tremendous love and admiration for you, and it's an honor to be up here tonight. To Michael Lewis, the one, the only.
Thank you.
I am well versed in the journalism and writing talents of our next roaster, Susan Kahn. She's an excellent writer and such a logical writer that even I can understand it. She served as marketing director for Florida International Bank, which has nothing to do with Florida International University. And she served as vice president of marketing with Northern Trust, where we worked together. Through the years, I became most impressed with her writing and other skills. She's written many articles for Miami Today. She's married to Larry Kahn, a very successful real estate developer that I got to know when we were both on the board of the Florida International University Foundation. Here's Susan Kahn.
Ray was very kind. He said we worked together. That's not quite true. Thank you. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay. I started to say Ray was very kind. He said we worked together. I actually worked for him. But he gave such a nice introduction. I know where he gets his jokes, but since he did give such a nice introduction, I'm not going to tell you. Anyway, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to talk about one of my favorite people, Michael Lewis. This is actually the second version of my speech. I read my first one to my husband, And he said, no, 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 you're being much too nice. This is a roast. So, Michael, if I offend you, it's his fault. Well, like many of you, I have known Michael and Carmen for many years. They've obviously been a fixture on the Miami scene. And so often when people think of Michael, they think of Carmen. And when they think of Carmen, they think of Michael. Two peas in a pod. No, when people think of Michael and Carmen, what they're really thinking is how in the world did those two ever get together? Michael, as you can see, is a pretty straight arrow, formal kind of guy. We walked, he's at home mostly in a suit and tie, as you know. We once walked with him through Fairchild Gardens, and he called it a wilderness experience. He starts his emails with "dear," and he ends with yours truly. And of course, they're always grammatically correct. Well, when I began writing my column for Miami Today, I got to know Michael better. And it turns out we actually had quite a lot in common. We're both from that same stolid Germanic ancestry. You know, we like things organized and methodical, just so. The difference is we married very different spouses. Now, my husband's gotten used to my orderliness over the years. It was a little bit of an adjustment in the beginning. He got up in the middle of the night one night to get some water, and he came back and the bed was made. He accuses me of having the newspapers delivered straight to the garbage can to save time. But if you've been to Michael's condo, which it sounds like a lot of you have, you know that his home life is a lot more exciting than mine. When he comes in the door at night, assuming he can get through the door, he's greeted by 50 hats and a collection of bird cages. Well, another interesting tidbit that I discovered, of information that I discovered Michael and I have in common, is tinnitus, which is ringing of the ears. We both have it. I'm only mentioning this because I know a lot of you have cornered Michael at cocktail parties and pitched him on some idea that you think would make a great editorial in the paper. Say, casino gambling in downtown Miami. And Michael's standing there smiling and nodding. Well, don't get excited. It's not that he agrees with you. He just can't hear you. Of course, the biggest thing that we have in common is our love of writing. And that brings me to Miami Today, the most important newspaper in Miami. Maybe soon the only newspaper in Miami. I hear there's another one up in Doral somewhere, but we don't talk about it. Anyway, it's been wonderful for me being associated with Miami Today. I've been writing a humor column for Michael on life in Miami for almost 10 years now, and I can say it's truly a labor of love. Of course, you know what that means. When the paper went digital, it took me 2 years of writing just to get a free subscription out of it. And last week I got a notice that my subscription expired. Now, I wouldn't say Michael is cheap, but when he says writers are a dime a dozen, he means it. Well, and speaking of Miami Today, you know as a reader that there are certain topics, as we just heard, that you're going to read about quite a lot. Probably the biggest topic that Michael likes to write about concerns the S word. We all know what the S word is. Stadium. Michael is not a sports fan. He didn't want the Marlins Stadium. He didn't want the FIU Stadium. He didn't want the new Dolphins Stadium. And if David Beckham is in the audience, I'm pretty sure he doesn't want your stadium either. You could give Michael 50-yard line tickets to the Super Bowl, and he still wouldn't want any stadiums. Well, at least that's what he says in print. I happen to have some evidence to the contrary. Or at least let's say Michael may not be a sports fan, but he does seem to have a little thing for cheerleaders. Now, Michael, I know you're not the Facebook or the Twitter type, but you do need to realize that everyone today has a camera with a cell phone. So with that little word of caution, I have a memento from the evening that I wanted to present. Michael, you might enjoy opening that.
I want you to all see it. Lovely. Did anybody enjoy that? You have to open it too?
Oh, you gotta open it. Yeah.
That's very
Just
good.
rip it. Just rip it
Rip
apart.
it? Rip it? Rip it? You don't want the ribbon back?
No, I don't want the rest of that.
Okay, let's see if I can get this open now. It's very difficult. You want to give me a hand here? Here, we tear that side, I'll tear this side. And you don't look at it, Carmen. That's all right, you don't need to see this. You know that marriage? We want it to last, so don't look at the picture for goodness sake.
It's a rare opportunity. See how he's wearing a suit and tie?
Isn't that a great picture of a Marlins cheerleader? Susan, thank you. I'm going to leave this right here where it's useful.
I keep being afraid I'll forget this damn thing is turned on. Our next speaker is Ron Sheffield. Ron knows Michael through the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce, where Michael, said you served as a cool head when things weren't so cool. He's presently president and CEO of Eslinger, Wooten, Maxwell Realtors, one of the most prominent real estate firms in South Florida with over 800 associates and staff members. That's amazing. How do they make a living? He's a member of the executive board of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce and the executive board of the Beacon Council. Once again, he's received so many rewards, I'd have to do nothing but talk about that. I've known him for a number of years, and I don't know anybody that doesn't like him. Ron?
You may have to revise that after tonight here, Ray. I'm also honored to be here tonight. A lot of our friends are here. I think many of us know each other in the room. Carmen, I think you're probably the reason I was invited tonight. Thank you for that. But my invitation was a little odd. It had 3 questions on my invitation to be a roaster tonight. First question was I going to be attending the Michael Lewis roast on October the 15th? Second question was, had I advertised at least a quarter-page ad within the last 30 days? And the third statement said, if you've answered yes to questions 1 and 2, would you like to be a roaster? Signed, Carmen Betancourt Lewis. I think that we all know that Michael has also been reporting the news for a very, very long time. But I'm not sure that you knew that his first job was delivering newspapers. Carmen gave us a little background on Michael's life, and I found that, and I was curious, and so we did a little research. And we found the list of your early newspaper subscribers where you were delivering newspapers. And what was so interesting about it, very fascinating, the names on the list are names that you would all recognize, like Julia Tuttle, William Burdine, Mary Brickell, Henry Flagler, and oh my goodness, look, Ray Marchman's on the list. And lastly, just to mention the name of Michael Lewis in South Florida conjures up a warm spot in our souls for America's favorite pastime. Yep, you guessed it, baseball, Michael Lewis. We've heard a lot about David Sampson here in the last couple of speakers. But I don't know if you know that Michael has been writing a sequel to the original Marlins editorial every 3 or 4 weeks. In fact, I was at my office yesterday, and I thought, well, let's just see what Michael wrote in my last paper. Well, the last one laying on my desk was a sequel to the Marlins story. But now, Michael, you started out saying that the stadium was about $1 billion. That was about 3.5 years ago. And then it rose to $2 billion. But yet 3 weeks ago, now it's $3 billion. So I'm assuming that those numbers are backed up by something somewhere. But, I started thinking about $3 billion. That's a lot of money. What can you do with $3 billion? Well, that's equivalent to about a dozen of our Perez art museums that's just been completed last year. Or you might want to look at the tunnel to our favorite port. We could build 3 tunnels for $3 billion. Or it would be equivalent to 2 full days of shopping and dining with the vice president of advertising at Miami Florida. Well, Michael, you've heard Don talk about his contact with David Sampson, and you've also heard Michael talk about his contact with David Sampson this week. Well, I think you guys must have kind of primed the pump, because I got a call today, not only from David Sampson, but on a conference call, we had Jeff Loria also on the phone. And they said, we understand that a lot of people are gathering tonight, and we just want to make sure that the message gets across that we think the world of Michael Lewis. And so they have sent you a very special gift, and they would like to see you wear this. They are actually inviting you also to a Marlins game as their guest. And you might want to stand up and kind of take possession of this. This is a beautiful, beautiful jersey, as you see, Miami Marlins. But then the back of it's really special. Michael, you might want to hold that up there. I think this is going to be a keeper. And Michael, before you sit down, one more thing here. Jeff and David have also invited you for dining at the Marlins Park. They have some wonderful dining facilities inside the park, and you probably haven't been inside the park. But wonderful places to eat. But I knew that you might be afraid to eat in Marlins Park at their invitation. So Anita and I have chipped in together here, and we are presenting you with some of your favorite chocolates that you can take to the game with you and munch on that throughout the game. You can be seated now. You'll have another shot at this in a minute. Thank you. Michael, thank you. You have been an integral part of our company's life. Michael and I talk a lot, as he talks to many of you a lot. He's always teased me about the last recession, the only recession that we all had here about 7 years ago. And he said, you were still telling people to buy housing in 2006. Do you still feel like that was the right thing to do? So yes, here we are again. It's time to buy. If you've missed a shot at it, you still have time. So thank you, Michael. We'll look forward to another 30 years.
Jack Lowell has been in the real estate business for nearly 4 decades. He was vice president of Flagler Real Estate for 19 years. He was owner and chief executive of Summa Property, a commercial real estate brokerage, leasing, and management firm. He was partner in charge of Tishman Speyer's office in Miami. Prior to that, he managed the Richard Ellis Miami office, and he served as general manager of the Grovile development. Michael met him through the Brickell Area Association. Jack has been a fixture in this town for many years and is once again a well-loved guy.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a real treat for me. I took a big gamble coming here tonight because, as some of you know, I favor casino gaming. And as you may also know, let's say Carmencita is not so much a fan. And I discovered when Carmencita gets excited, she talks very quickly, and voice kind of goes up a little bit of pitch. And Michael had to get between us. And he did a great job. We didn't come to fisticuffs, but we've had the most animated conversation I've ever had with Carmencita over that issue. It's really neat. Now, of course, we are missing tonight the gubernatorial debate. I even wore my Republican tie today in honor of the occasion, but I said, I'll come here because I really like Michael. But Michael looks a little bit like our governor in some respects. He's better dressed. He's a lot nicer, and he usually means what he says. The challenge for Michael is he'll never be a politician because he has a very, very serious case of morals. Now, Armando Cadena had to leave on a plane right after lunch today. So he gave me very strict instructions and something to read for you. And so the instructions are, please deliver this with elegance, eloquence, and a Cuban accent. I suggest that you watch I Love Lucy on YouTube before the event. Please mimic Ricky, not Lucy. Michael and I both suffer from very limited Spanish, but I want to give Michael a hint. One phrase that's really stuck with me and done me well in any Spanish-speaking country is "más mojito." Use it often. I know one that Michael knows is "Donde es el baño?" Those two phrases have done wonders for me. We share a lot in common, Michael and Armando and myself. So Armando says he's a great admirer of yours, Michael. And among the things that we all have in common, as Armando says, first at my home, as is the case in Michael's and mine, I always have the last word, which is, yes, honey. In fact, I am not there in person because my wife wanted to see the changing of the leaves, so I'm sitting here in Connecticut watching the chlorophyll drain out of the leaves. As Armando says, second like Michael, I'm married above myself, as I did. Natasha is here to testify to that. And I know that Michael knows that and doesn't need me to remind him, since Carmencita reminds him 3 times a day. One other characteristic we have in common is Armando and Michael and I are all still here working with our reputations relatively intact. Now that cannot be said for some people who have been ridden out of town on a rail in the past, including David Paul, Alex Dowd, Joe Gersten, who is still in Australia. And sadly enough, we will not be joined tonight by Frank Nero and David Sampson. What a shame. Well, as Armando says, what a couple, what a job they've done with Miami Today. I get more useful civic and business information from Miami Today than from any other publication. On behalf of Armando and myself, Michael, congratulations from Carmencita.
Michael met Mark Trowbridge in Leadership Miami. He's had a 20-year career serving various nonprofits. He's currently the CEO of the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce. He was president of the University of Florida's National Alumni Board of Directors. And Michael says he's the funniest man in Miami. Welcome, Mark.
Well, thank you. So what you see here in front of you is who you're going to hear from when you tell Carmen no tomorrow. I'm the 2.0 version. 388 pounds of joy. I hope you like the hat. I left the tag on Carmen, so of course I can return it. So we all enjoy a good roast. The last roast I actually saw on television was a Joan Rivers, rest her soul. How many of you saw that roast? So the idea really is that Michael goes last and we kind of work our way down the line. So I'm going to kind of go with that mode, if you will. So I'm going to start with my fellow roasters here. So we're going to be very kind to you, Ray, because you're doing a great job up here. And I just noticed in your print that it's 72-point font. So that's excellent. The script tonight is 4,000 pages long, which is what the Herald used to be. Now, when I first met Michael, which by the way was tonight, because whether you know this or not, they only cover the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. So we'll get to you on that. Oh yeah, where are my Gable lights? Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor. It's a tough crowd. But I thought that I would share with you that I visited with him in his office, and I asked him, I said, how do you find great reporters and writers in Miami? Because we know that in some cases that's not easy, and a lot of his reporters are very young in the first postings, and so I give them all a spelling test. How many of you have taken the spelling test? Well, let me tell you, I did. And he didn't waste a moment. He found me a copy of it, and he said, you have the next few minutes, you have to sit right there and take it. And then he was going to grade it, 20 words. And these were not easy words. These were words like trick words, like bookkeeper, which has like 2 O's, 2 K's, 2 E's, 14 P's. You had to make sure that you could figure out how to spell some of the words, how to use there, and everybody's favorite, your, and your, which nobody in this town has figured out as of yet. But I did pass. He said if a position would ever open, that he might consider hiring me, and so I'm going to give the same quiz, but in different format, to each of the roasters. So we're going to start with Ray. And Ray went to Emory University, is that right, Ray? A fine institution in Atlanta. He was the year before they burned it to the ground. And so I know that he knows how to spell, and so I'm not going to ask him to spell anything. And clearly, you have your notes here. Then we have Jack. Everybody loves Jack. I thought the Wilford Brimley thing was a bit of a low blow, because, Wilford has not had much of a career as of late. But then I figured it out. You're talking about Jack as well. So, off room. Then, of course, Ron. Now, some of you probably don't know this, but Ron and I just had a great program together, and he shared a lot about his background. His father was an executive with JCPenney. How many of you are wearing that tonight? Of course, Evalda's Folly is wearing JCPenney. And I wanted to thank him because I thanked him in a small group and in a larger group. JCPenney was the first company to really embrace the huskier male. And so I just want to say thank you, that I didn't have to wear my clothes with my pant leg rolled up as if I was a 44-year-old. So thank you for doing that. And Ron went to the University of Tennessee. I went to the University of Florida. We have a few other Gators sitting up here in the front row. And I'm just going to ask him to spell. This is going to be very, very easy. Actually, it's going to be difficult. I want you to spell Tennessee. That's one of those trick words. There are 7 N's in it and like 1 E. All right, you're good, you're good. Now next to him, by the way, Mike has embraced the idea of what, a roast is about. He took a shot at me. By the way, all he did was tell you what my Halloween costume is going to be. I am going as Mayor Rob Ford. I know that I want you all to look on your phones, maybe Google it, but I do look an awful lot like Mayor Ford, including being on the People Mover several months ago, and somebody absolutely insisted on taking a selfie with me and saying, Mayor Ford, it's great to have you here in Miami. I said, where else would I go to dry out? Susan, you are and by the way, I just figured out why David Sampson keeps you around, because he's taller than you. Susan, you did a lovely job. You're so elegant and kind, and I love that you embrace humor as well. I thought you did a lovely job. And you're representing the females up here, and we really appreciate you doing that. I reserve my time to come back to you. Mayor Don, of course, we all love Mayor Don, and he worked very hard on putting his roast together. He went through multiple drafts. So I'm just going to ask you to get up and tell us what NATO stands for. That's your quiz. That's hard, right? How many of you really know what NATO stands for? He worked 27 years. Yeah, I do. Don't be nervous.
The North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Now, before you all, how many of you agree with that? North Atlantic Treaty Organization. All right. You got an easy one.
It's expanded.
Spell Tennessee.
T-A-T-O-R-S.
Next to him, you'll hear from him in just a few minutes, the beautiful and distinguished Billy Talbert. He brought, of course, a gift, which I didn't and Jack didn't, so we'll get back to you. But the good news is Billy's funny. Nobody loves Miami more. What a cheerleader for Greater Miami, everywhere that he goes. he wants to make sure you have the palm pin on. So who does not have their pin? Well, the bar is closed for the rest of the evening. And of course, you'll hear from Sheldon. Now, Sheldon had a big day today. He passed the gavel to the new chair of the Beacon Council, the lovely Donna Abood. Hello, Donna. He did so, not like most chairs, where you have to sort of pry it out of their hands as though it has become an extension of them. So very nicely done today. And Gary Swope sends his regards. Little inside joke. Frank Nero is not here. I actually saw Frank a couple of weeks ago. He invited me to a Marlins game. He really did. We actually sat in David Sampson's seats, which, by the way, are amazing. There's only one problem, and I don't know how he sees over the dugout, but the only problem I have is that you have to pay attention the entire game because they are so close to home plate that if you're not paying attention, you're liable to lose a limb, if you will. Now, Jeffrey Loria sat at the other end of the aisle, and what I noticed about him was that he texts on a flip phone. Now, this guy is one of the most wealthy people, but he texts on a flip phone. So maybe we could work that into the marketing plan. But here's the best part about going to the baseball game with Frank. He calls me, he says, I've got 4 tickets. Now, I didn't realize that he had been given those tickets, so he says, they're only $25 a piece. So we get to the game, meet him at Will Call, and I give him $25. He's like, no, I need a check. And I said, okay, usually people prefer cash, but okay. So I'm going to have to send you a check. It's going to be a 2-party out-of-state previously endorsed check, which he was fine with because that was kind of like his severance. But the reason he wanted me to get him a check is, you're not going to believe this, it was for Alopecia Night. It was for the Alopecia Foundation, and so we were making a $25 donation for previously purchased free seats. So there you have it. Frank's away because his father passed away. We send him our regards. Now the last thing, of course, Michael Lewis, who we have known each other for some time. And so I did like most of you do when you're not sure exactly about somebody's background, because somebody sent us a bio which was heavily scrubbed and redacted and only listed incredible highlights, no real lowlights. And I Googled Michael Lewis. So the first thing that comes up is that you're an author and journalist of such bestsellers as Flash Boys and Other Wall Street Tales. I realized that was not you. Then the next Michael Lewis is a professor at Ohio Northern University, which, by the way, I have no idea where that is, but a College of Law professor. That's not you either. I'm so glad the building turned off the air conditioning. Is it like 8 o'clock already? Let's go green. Let's go green. Then there's Michael Lewis, who's a State Farm agent in Lakewood, Washington. Not you. Then there's a guy who just calls himself Michael Lewis, the chef, who looks like he makes a mean cassoulet. So Carmen, I'll get you that recipe. And of course, there's a Michael Lewis who will make you a handmade mandolin, which is Michael Lewis. Michael, there's a lot of you out there, but there's only one Michael Lewis that we know and love, and of course that is you. Congratulations. We have lots of things in common, including our Mackinac Island connection, and now you know where all the fudge went. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks, Ray.
He was right, you are. Michael has known Bill since his days in county government and the Women's Tennis Association. Michael served on the board of the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau with Bill. Bill's now the director of the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau and has been for about 19 years. Is that correct?
One of those numbers is right.
Good. But most of all, Bill's been a great neighbor. He used to live down the street from Michael and Carmen, and they said he was the greatest neighbor they ever had. Actually, you were the only neighbor that they had. Bill's Bill Talbot, a well-known name in this city.
Boy, have I been waiting for this.
Oh,
Hang on a second. Couple of things. I'm gonna take a picture here. Couple of things. There you go. We're going on. There's a thing called the internet, Michael. I don't know if you heard about that. I'm going to put that out there. A couple of things. Is the bar open or closed? Thank you, sir. Thank you. Couple of quick things. I'm here for two reasons. Carmen called me, and I said yes. And the second reason was she said I would be the only speaker. And to you, yes, yes, and yes. Also, I got to tell you, I'm the only one that didn't pay my PR firm to write a speech, okay? I don't have any papers. Okay, that's the thing, I can't afford PR. You know, first of all, since this went up, I haven't been able to hear a word. So, if I might, who gave this to you? Can I turn this around? I'm just, now I wanna out Michael a little bit. Because really, and we spent a lot of time, we were neighbors, and by the way, my wife Cindy would love to have been here tonight, but she's getting her nails done. She'd love to be here, so. We were neighbors. We moved in the North Grove, and soon after we moved in, they moved out. And quickly, the property values doubled. That was one thing. And the second thing was, Michael and Carmen apparently brought food over for the peacocks. So the peacocks that were on the other side of 17th Avenue now are sitting at your old house, doing stuff on my lawn, going on the top of my house, and so you're going to hear from our lawyers. So, that's the thing. But I want to actually out Michael a little bit, because he and I share a love for baseball. You're gonna laugh. Who do we share a love for?
well, I suppose we share our love for railroads, Bill.
Railroads too, but what baseball team?
Well, the Chicago Cubs.
The Chicago Cubs. Any Cubs fans here? Good Lord. No, this is really, I'm serious. Okay, we want to get the bar open, but no, this is true. I've given Michael a baseball bat from St. Louis, from Louisville. Dear Michael, love, and he has that, and also a relief of Wrigley Field. Anybody ever been to Wrigley Field? Yeah. So you'd hear about the negative on baseball. Michael loves baseball. He actually does, and he keeps it very quiet, and it works. So we're gonna keep this out here. So I've got a present, present for Michael here. If you could open this up, it's all about and Carmen, we love you. Let's hear it for Carmen. Come on.
This is
What is this?
a Miami Club rum.
Miami Club rum here. It's made here in Miami. It's made right down the street. It's a numbered copy. We want a picture here, and this is because we want a nice editorial, Michael, next week.
Our family really believes in rum, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Couple of things. Actually, I'm going to go back. I was thinking quickly. I've been at the Bureau now for 24 years. I was at the county. Where's Ruth Shack? She's still here? Ruth was here. And I remember when I was working on this Bureau job, I'll never forget it, and Michael can remember writing it. I can't say it today. Michael wrote in an editorial when we were running for this. He said, Bill has no known political enemies. And that, I think, ended quickly. Now so. And Jack, I want to thank you for that trip to Malaysia that we took together. Thank you for picking up the first-class airfare. That was very generous. But actually, I want to give Michael, because we're going to be serious here tonight. And I'm about history. How many history fans are here? Everybody. So it actually fell out, but I'm going to give Michael something I hope he doesn't have, and I hope he'll put on his desk, and it's something that you will maybe recognize. And do you know what this is?
Oh,
Does anybody know what this is?
certainly we know
This is for Michael Lewis, our favorite guy. Thank you very much.
This is a brick from a building that used to stand here on this street.
That's right, that's for you.
Thank you.
That's from their old building.
Our final roaster tonight is Sheldon Anderson. Sheldon is a native of Miami, as am I. You were born a few years before me. He's a graduate of Ohio State University, which does have a better team than Emory. He's active in many civic organizations, including the Beacon Council, the Museum of Contemporary Art, the New World Symphony, the Adrian R. Center, and the Cleveland Orchestra. He was a senior officer with Southeast Bank before Northern Trust snagged him away. And he served as many capacities with Northern Trust, culminating in his role as president of the Southeast region of Northern Trust, which encompasses most money management from Florida to Maine. Sheldon.
Thank you, Ray. Sorry. Thank you, Al. You're still looking out for me. I'd like to say before I have any comments about the Bittencourt-Lewis family that the happiest days of my career were the days that I spent with you, Ray. You were then and you are now a marketing genius. And so much of what Northern Trust is, was, and will become is really because of you. And I miss you a lot. So the next roast will be of Ray Marchman and Finley Matheson. I can assure you that we don't have a lot of dirt on you, Michael, but I've got a lot of dirt on those two.
The bar won't close on that one.
No, the bar will never close on that one. Everyone has taken everything I wanted to say except a few things. You know, going last, being the cleanup person, is rather difficult when you deal with a team of speakers that we've had before. So I'll just say a few things. First and foremost, I've known Michael for a long time. It never occurred to me that he went to the University of Michigan. And I think he was too much of a gentleman to ever admit to me that he knew that I went to Ohio State. Michael is one of the kindest people that I know. I was his de facto private banker. And what I mean by that is, Michael, I get a phone call, it's Michael. Michael would raise a little issue, and I'd listen, and he'd tell me about a situation. He'd talk about loan pricing and extensions, and I'd hang up and take care of it. I was also his de facto landlord, and he and I had some very, very interesting conversations about the living conditions of Miami today. But we won't talk much about that. I also got from Carmen some little known facts about Michael. And I'm a animal lover. His little bio said, Michael is kind to animals. That didn't sound like he's an animal lover to me. And so, I don't know about the rest of you, but I just can't imagine Michael Lewis with a big, tall ladder climbing up to rescue a kitten from a tree. I can't imagine. But Carmencita, I'm going to report you to the management of our building. Someone said tonight that you have a host of cats. I'm sure there's a reason for that. Carmencita is truly Michael's other half. And she is a salesperson to the hilt. Let me give you an example. So it was right after the recession, the Great Recession, and Carmencita had a special, I don't know, she was having a promotion. She was going to highlight some industry. Or maybe it was the 25th anniversary. I'm not quite sure. But I'm on direct dial from Carmencita. So we're in the middle of the recession. Carmencita calls and says, Sheldon, I have this fabulous opportunity for Northern Trust. She says, we're having this special thing, and I want Northern Trust to be the first company to commit to this. It's really important to me, and here's how much it costs. And I said, Carmencita, do you not realize that we're in the middle of the greatest recession the United States economy has ever suffered? I said, I certainly would like to help you, but you've got to, cut me a little bit of slack. How about a discount? And Carmencita had the gall to say to me at that moment, I wouldn't give my grandmother a discount. And I said, and Carmencita, I don't think you and I have much to talk about. The answer is no. But a few days later, we had a great deal. We did what Carmencita wanted us to do. But at the most...
We always do.
We always do. And so when Carmencita called and said, I'd like to have this for Michael, I'd like to have it at Northern Trust, what I really wanted to say to Carmen, I said, but of course, Carmencita. But what I really wanted to say was, Carmencita, don't you realize that I retired 2 years ago? I have absolutely no standing with Northern Trust. What makes you think that I can approve this? But I did. The beauty of it all. And so finally what I'd like to say is that Michael is a very patient, loving man. He loves Carmencita. But my wife and I say about Michael is long-suffering. Congratulations, Michael.
Oh, gosh. What a great man. And he was a great president of Northern Trust. Now for some fun. I get to introduce Carmen, AKA Carmencita. Many of you here know that for many years, Carmen served as chairman of the Prologue Society. That is the society dedicated to the love and study of history. During her tenure, there were 17 speakers covering some 120 hours of Cuban history. During that same period, there was one speaker who was given 30 minutes to cover the history of the United States. Everyone agreed she did a fabulous job. When I quietly suggested at a board meeting that she might consider Robert's Rules of Order, she said, "Who's Robert? I never heard of him. I never met him. He couldn't possibly be very important, and I prefer Fulgencio's rules." The Prologue Society still exists today, thanks in great part to Carmen. She worked very hard at it. She built a lot of new members, and now here is the one and only Carmen Betancourt Lewis.
Thank you for being here. Whoops. Thank you for being here. I really, truly have enjoyed, Michael. Thank you for all our friends. Well, when Michael asked me to marry him on the first date, my son George, when I announced it, he said, "You're changing my life again." And I said, "George, successful people are the ones that can adapt to change." You know, we were moving from from Chile specifically, so that was a big, big change. Michael asked me to marry him the first day we went out. I said no. But 7 months after, we were married. And I have to say that when I introduced Michael to my family said, "Well, he is our type, but not yours." And I said, "See how good a daughter I am? I'm pleasing you." Michael, I told George, at that time he was 13, I said, "You know, George, don't worry. I would never bring anyone to our family that doesn't meet the standards, wear a costume." Well, Michael Lewis, you have met the standards and passed it many times over. You are a great, great human being. Love you. Bella. And this is my oldest granddaughter, Isabella Galvis, Isabella Sofia Galvis. Okay? Will I look that way? I have two more. Tomas of 7 and Lucia, we call her Lulu, of 4. They're adorable. You probably have seen their pictures. I'm very proud of you, Bella.
Are you going to introduce Michael?
Oh, yes, of course. Okay, Michael, would you come to the podium and say a few words? Only a few.
Unaccustomed as I am. First of all, I'm really touched that so many of you have come up here tonight to see these beautiful new offices of Northern Trust. Aren't they lovely? I know that's what we're all here for. Ray, thank you so much for what you've done. Ray was, in fact, and Northern Trust were, in fact, the first people who really recognized Miami Today and what we were trying to do. Did join us in advertising and literary societies and so on. It's been a good ride, and Ray got it started, and Sheldon and many others here in this room. I really thank Northern Trust for putting up with us, all of us, this evening. Northern Trust and Ray, I think, did recognize that Miami Today was trying to do something that was a little bit different. We were going to provide people news they needed before they knew they needed it. And now I trust they hope that they know that they needed it. I talked to hundreds of people who said, no, there's no room for another newspaper. And thanks to the other publications in this community, they're now recognize that there is room for Miami Today. So we say thank you to you all. The folks who've roasted us tonight did a really good job. My face is probably a little bit beet red. Most of it was true. Enough of it was true to be worthwhile. I appreciate their very kind remarks, and those that weren't so very kind, well, you can take them all with a grain of salt. You don't have to believe everything you've heard tonight, you know, folks. It's not really necessary. The roast should have been for Carmencita, we all know that. And she makes a much better target and much more interesting and more lively. What we get was what we get out of this thing. And Carmen has put up with me for a long time, as you all have. There are a few of you here who know me PC, that's pre-Carmen, but I can see Ida nodding yes. There are a few of you here. Most of you haven't. Most of you sort of think we come as an entry. I was a human being before I met Carmen, but not very much. So I really thank my wife for everything we've done. Really complete. I'm standing right here before you at an awkward time. The bar is about to reopen, and there I stand with a microphone. I don't think I ought to stand here any longer. I really thank you all for coming. I thank everybody for the kind remarks, and I thank the bartenders for their patience.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.